duty.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for your intervention. And I promise to make every effort not to overshoot the time span allotted to me. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make my contribution to the 2014 budget debate under the theme, A Better Guyana for All Guyanese. Hardly any difference between this theme and the motto of the partnership I represent. I sincerely hope that our motto is not used as a mere slogan, but to give meaning to it by making such allocations that would be of benefit to the poor and needy and departments in need of resources. Having examined what has been provided in the budget to be expended this year, I harbor a strong sense that this year's budget has little to offer citizens of the middle and lower classes of this society. It is about big spending on capital projects of the government's taste. This budget is devoid of any consideration of increases of salaries and allowances, although it is without doubt that the public sector workers of the non-contractual grouping must exist on meager wages and salaries, which is at subsistence level and is insufficient in many cases to put 3 meals on the table for a month. And we are painfully aware that corruption is rife among public sector workers. But who can blame them? The government has simply said to us, not a cent more. We have to build a modern 8-gate airport terminal building, a Milo Falls hydro project, and provide subsidies to those inefficiently run public institutions. Those we will take care of first. You must take your time whenever that comes. The joint services which the government relies on to provide safety and security for the people of this country must suffer another year with no improvement in their emoluments and consequently no improvement in their lifestyle. I've taken notice of the minister's indication that the collective bargaining agreement between the unions and government will resume. But Mr. Speaker, I am wary of the government's antics. To start these talks and then for some inexplicable reason, they abandon it and pay their own unilateral increases. Their allowances are horribly low in the face of high costs of rent, mortgage, light bill, which is unstable, telephone and water bills. These are the very people who must put their lives on the line to prevent and detect crime, control traffic on the streets, confront armed and dangerous criminals, fight fires, and maintain security of those criminals who are confined by a sentence of court to a correctional institution. Mr. Speaker, the very important function of the Guyana Defense Force in our national security architecture makes them available for our national defense and to provide support to law enforcement in areas such as narco-trafficking and piracy. In this regard, 3 Metal Shark patrol boats have been received through the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative, and government is urged to ensure that the Defense Force is adequately resourced to execute its mandate without being sacrificed at the altar of expediency for specious capital projects. The Guyana Fire Service, with its impending name change to the Guyana Fire and Rescue Service, has always had a very essential protective role to prevent fires and to respond when there is an outbreak. There has been an increase in the location of fire stations outside of Georgetown, which is not a bad idea in itself, but like Georgetown and New Amsterdam, auxiliary water sources have provided a challenge. Fires occurring deep in new housing areas will, if not corrected, fires occurring deep in these new housing areas will, if the situation is not corrected, encounter unavailability of water once the tenders and tanks run out. public water supply is unavailable, and in few cases, the nearest canal would be out of the reach of the hoses available to the ranks at the scene. Georgetown and New Amsterdam continues to be without hydrants, a fact known to the government, but it does not appear that government is willing to solve the existing problem to find a successor owner for the facility since the now defunct Georgetown Sewerage and Water Commissioners given up. There is another deficiency in the fire and rescue service. The department is weak in the water because they do not have a boat. This is an issue which is also well known to the government, but which they seem to ignore. With Georgetown being the principal port of entry and exit for most of our imports and exports, it is not difficult to comprehend why this need is expressed. All bonds are at a point on the Demerara River, and the fact that yachts and other pleasure boats are arriving here, a boat to fight fires in the river or in our EEZ is a necessity, but it does not appear that government is interested in having this need satisfied, unless something goes awfully wrong. The Guyana Police Force is the principal law enforcement agency in Guyana and should be resourced according to the wide responsibilities to provide protection for life and property, the maintenance of law and order, the preservation of the peace, and the repression of internal disturbances. Last year, the Honorable Minister of Finance, on page 45 of his address on public safety and security, said that, I quote, "Government has embarked on a comprehensive program of reform to the security sector. Government sees this as a long-term process, which has designed a strategy which articulates a holistic approach to citizen security, safety, and public welfare." He went on to explain that the strategy focuses on key areas, dealing with developing and strengthening administrative competencies, imposing professionalism, strengthening accountability and integrity, deepening organizational linkages for greater cohesiveness and impact, expanding safe neighborhoods and pilots, and establishing houses of justice to allow greater people participation and involvement in public security issues. I must ask, after 1 year has elapsed, what has been the benefit derived from this intervention? Has there been a reduced number of robberies under arms, murders, trafficking in narcotics? Mr. Speaker, a reform of the security sector requires such changes that would impact on those crimes which negatively affect the lives of our citizens. Crime statistics issued by the police intermittently has given no reason to feel comfortable that the situation is improving. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister of Home Affairs announced in the final days of 2011 the sermon from the Mount at Tivoli. He let us know that under the Capital Simmons Group work, work could be done in several areas of the force, including administration, succession planning, probity, integrity, public relations, and communications. He also said that 10 persons would be employed to hold key positions in the Strategic Management Department, which would become a department of the force, and they will work together with the police to ensure that the plan will be implemented. For months now, nothing has been heard of the Capital Simmons Group, and there has been 3 resignations from among the 10 persons employed to the Strategic Management Group in such areas as communications, research, risk management, because of an apparent fallout in relations between certain members of the group and certain senior officers. I am certain that had the Honorable Minister exercised the foresight to ensure that friction between the two groups were minimized, the suspicions which members of the force harbored about a group which was formed to aid the development of the organization would have been removed. I should ask the Honorable Minister whether officers and other ranks are aware of the roles of the Strategic Management Department. Has the Strategic Management Department produced any change? What is the force doing with the product? And is there a relationship between change management and the Strategic Management Department? What has been the impact of the change on society and our crime prevention strategies documented? Mr. Speaker, I see no change setting in place in the Guyana Police Force. There is much of the same. Investigative tactics employed by the police have not changed. When the investigators cannot solve crime, we eventually hear of allegations of brutality or torture. We recall in 2009 the highly publicized incident of a young man who was held during an investigation into the death of a man known for his long association with the PPP on the West Demerara. The publication revealed to us that the man's private parts and pubic area were burnt during an investigation into the man's death. Mr. Speaker, in the midst of the reform process, there was the despicable Colwell Harding case. He was detained at Timeri Police Station pending a charge of theft when he alleged that a button was forced up his anus, injuring him. Mr. Speaker, Stabroek News of January 18, 2014 published recently a spike in armed robberies occurring on the quarantine between number 49, 55, 56, and 57 villages during the last quarter of 2013, when 5 families were attacked during the last quarter of the year. The residents complained of police indifference to their reports, frequent blackout, and bush not being weeded. The choice of the 5 aforementioned areas for the reform of the GPF was poorly thought out, as they do not deal with the core issues affecting the police delivery of an efficient service to the public itself. It explains why at this point there is no discernible change in police performance. For any quick impact on performance, the government ought to have followed the recommendations of earlier work produced in the security sector action reform project. In October 2006, a team from the African Security Section Network visited Guyana at the invitation of DFID and the UK government to advise on the security sector reform implementation strategy. That visit resulted in the Security Section Action Plan, which was negotiated with the government of Guyana and adopted by the National Assembly on November 1, 2007. The ASSZ undertook a follow-up mission to Guyana in October 20th October 2003, to update and further develop the action plan. This report is the result. Its main objective is to provide a discussion paper laying out an analysis of Guyana's security sector and its current challenges, proposing options of reform, and providing a roadmap of detailed implementation actions for the future. The report also identified key issues underlying and facilitating the overall strategy, namely development of a national security policy framework, a national security architecture, capacity building for key actors, and the perceived links between the SSR and gender poverty issues. In the process, the report attempts to take note of both international best practices in SSR on the one hand and Guyanese realities on the other. What emerges in the report are recommendations designed to guide discussion between Her Majesty's government and the government of Guyana. Mr. Speaker, you would have heard me saying on several previous occasions that the government ditched this report. And as a result, they have clung to a very soft form of police reform, which is not serving to improve the Guyana Police Force. The report I referred to listed 8 areas. Crime intelligence. I'm sure we would recognize that crime intelligence is important to the improvement of the Guyana Police Force. And an anti-crime unit, the forensic laboratory, traffic management, a strategic review of the Guyana Police Force, community police relations, police accountability and transparencies, national security policy, management and legal framework, national security policy and legal framework continue. Mr. Speaker, if I were to repeat the 5 areas which the Honorable Minister has been championing, you will recognize that no change, perceptible change, would be seen in a long while because they do not deal with the core issues which is required to develop the Guyana Police Force. They deal with more clerical work. One of major importance, which could be attached to this 8 I just mentioned, is the one with probity. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that the future of the Guyana Police Force would have been well served with the implementations of the recommendations of the SSRP. I read in the March 27th issue of the Stabroek News comments attributed to the Honorable Minister of Home Affairs to the effect that there were significant criticisms prior to the launching of SWAT, most of which were unwarranted. Mr. Speaker, I must inquire from the Minister whether he is ever present when members of the Guyana Police Force are allegedly uncouth to members of the public, brutalize and torture members of the public, fail to attend to their reports promptly and efficiently, do not investigate crime efficiently, either absent from court or fail to summon witnesses to testify. Members of the public are fed up and disgusted by the failure of the police to prosecute their mandate, to bring justice to those offended. The people at number 48 Village were similarly disgusted with the crime situation in their area when they gave vent to their feelings, unfortunately, on the hard-working policemen who responded promptly to a report of robbery. I empathize with those residents and APNU calls on the government to provide vehicles to Springland and number 51 police station to service the needs of the people on the quarantine, rather than the rickety vehicle the number 51 police had to use from 62 toll gate. Narcotics is a growing problem in Guyana for the 20 years the PPP has been in office. Not before. When the PPP came to office, Mr. Speaker, when the PPP came to office, marijuana was the substance.
Don't forget in 1988 narcotic drugs and psychotropic
No,
substances.
I would not forget that. 20 years the PPP has been in office. They have not been able to subdue and control the spread of the narcotic trafficking throughout Guyana. I can recall, Mr. Speaker, that in 1985, we had developed the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act. And we then had a booklet, Guyana's Strategy for Dealing with the Drug Problem, which detailed the areas in which, yes, a very powerful booklet. It detailed the areas in which government would deal with the drug problem. And as a matter of fact, had started to proceed according to the guidelines of the booklet. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, in 1992, when this government came, they abandoned all the structures which the Guyana strategy for dealing with the drug problem had promulgated. We had organized meetings called JANOC between the services and NADLEC, National Drug Law Enforcement Committee, headed by the president, and all stakeholders attended that meeting monthly. I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, that that meeting was no walk in the park under Desmond Knight, those who know him. And that is why the drug problem, though it was growing, it was subjected and subdued because the first occasion we were able to detect narcotic going through the airport was through our organization from NADLEC. NADLEC gave us the inspiration to run certain operations and to, if you could remember, the hot pants cocaine. That is a result of Heights policies. Right, and there were several of them. So powder, yes, that was with Taps, who is now dead. We also had several other instances. We had Aunt Aggie. Aunt Aggie had a maze of security features to defeat the police, but yet we were able to enter. Mr. Speaker, that is the type of policing activity we on this side of the House would like to see of the police now. What has been happening? The police has been starved of the necessary resources, even though my friends on the other side would tend to say, or would say, that they're giving the police more resources. It's not the giving of the resources, where the resources are put. They need vehicles right now. Springlands and 51. And many other stations, no vehicles. But when the residents on the quarantine decided that they would rebel against the crime situation there, the Honorable Minister said, clean sweep, most insensitive statement to men who in a rickety vehicle visited the scene and did so promptly. Clean sweep. So all the commissioner had to do now was sweep, move everybody, much to the embarrassment of a number of policemen and their families who were in that area working honestly. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, I recall that in 1993, we had an aircraft flying from some part of Central America and depositing 250 pounds of cocaine up the Demerara River. Luckily, we were able to recover that drop. Luckily, we were able to arrest and prosecute all of them. All of them. Luckily, Mr. Speaker, we were able to prevent, by putting into the prisons a number of people who would have accelerated drug trafficking in this country. But unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the problems which existed then are existing now. There is no surveillance equipment. Government will not give us an indication that they would provide aerial surveillance for aircraft in our area without reporting their presence. And that is why now drug trafficking is so rampant in the interior locations, because now all the aircraft has to do is fly, come low, drop the cargo, and they're gone. By the time there is a response, there is somebody waiting who collects the stuff and gone. Well, I wrote your Prime Minister on that, and he has not answered.
Okay, Mr. Felix, you...
I wrote him on that.
Mr. Felix,
He wrote me and I wrote him.
Mr. Felix,
So you must know what you're talking
Mr.
about.
Felix, you will direct your comments to the chair. Don't get drawn in.
We have airstrips built in the hinterland community, and there is nothing to, you could reach you 99 times, because you could hardly question yourself. No airstrip built in the hinterland area, no one has ever been discovered or prosecuted. This fallout, Mr. Speaker, from drug trafficking are a large number of unexplained murders, gun smuggling, money laundering, export of cocaine in various forms of concealment methods. Mr. Speaker, every item leaving Guyana, every conceivable item exported from Guyana is tainted with cocaine. The last being awaro, pepper, wood, lumber. And it does not appear as though the government is taking seriously the effects of drug trafficking in this country. Mr. Speaker, there are the inability to investigate narco export and various forms of concealment. The government always claims that they need more information, when the information is right here. Recent investigations, Mr. Speaker, involving 2 foreign countries reveal cocaine in coconut milk, allegedly originating in Guyana, according to the investigation out there, and ended up with an international criminal organization with propensity for enforcing their will violently. So now we see the need for the SWAT team. There is no need for a SWAT team under our current circumstances. Absolutely none. A SWAT team has particular role and functions. What we need is to develop the Guyana Police Force, Mr. Speaker. We need to look at all the areas of weaknesses, the inability to investigate crime, narcotic trafficking, the inability for us to deal with the traffic problems. Those are areas which we need to develop. We need, Mr. Speaker, will solve our several law enforcement challenges, like the efficient investigation of crime, the prosecution of cases, and the prevention and detection of crime. This budget, Mr. Speaker, has not done much for the Guyana Police Force. There are marginal increases allocated to certain areas. The big increase is under training, and that is to take care of the expenses incurred with the SWAT team, of which 2 of the trainers still remain here, obviously to ensure that they are in shape, or they're properly looked after in the early stages. But that is an expense on us. Millions of dollars have to be paid. Community, I don't have to. You got to lie low. Mr. Speaker, community policing has been spoiled by this government. Community policing is intended to be an interaction. That's right, political policing, not community police. There are community policing groups which have now been turned into a police force. In the incident I related on the quarantine recently, the people had to protect themselves by forming themselves into vigilante groups. When on the very quarantine, there are a number of persons reported to me who have community policing vehicles in their homes and do nothing with it. And according to the reports I've received, this government pays them $20,000 to $25,000 a month. And that is why you will notice in this year's budget, community policing gets more than the Guyana police. 413 million. If a serious look at here, 447. More than the police will get. At least I think 33 million more. That is one ought to come under the act.
You require some further time.
Because, Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Speaker, I move that the honorable member be given 15 minutes to continue his presentation.
No. Proceed, Mr. Felix.
Mr. Speaker, I now move to an important area. That is the rule of law.
Take your time, take your time.
During a recent question I had asked, it was said that the entire question was affected a personal matter. I accepted the agreement then and still now. But what we have to recognize, Mr. Speaker, is that this government seems to have one law for them and another law for others. Around 2007, 2008, a certain minister of local government had committed a crime. Yes, so what? He should have been arrested. He should have been charged and placed before the court because the offenses he committed were clear criminal offenses.
These were allegations, Mr. Felix.
Well, the allegations made against him.
The Constitution says that one is presumed innocent
until proven guilty. Right. Well, I subject myself to your corrections.
Not mine. It is what the Constitution says.
I retired by then. Otherwise, that would have been the result.
I believe that.
Mr. Speaker, there is, Mr. Speaker, still another issue. When if any one of us is found to have committed a traffic offense, we jump the major road or any such thing, we have to be charged unless the discretion of the police operates in our favor. Not so over there. We can be drunk like a fish. We can crash into any other person's vehicle and we just walk away. Where is the rule of law? I am talking, Mr. Rui. Mr. Speaker, the road carnage on our roads is becoming more than a source of concern.
Yes, go ahead.
There are so many vehicles in, the drivers are indisciplined, and there are few policemen and fewer policemen. What the Honorable Minister ought to pay attention to is how to support the Guyana Police Force to retain staff. This minister has a dead hand on the police force, and nothing will move. And that is why this no confidence vote is so important. The no confidence vote ought to have seen Mr. Roy somewhere else. But he remains with his dead hand on the organization and literally stifling it. The micromanagement of the Guyana Police Force is becoming more and more obnoxious. when the minister can't get his way, he calls on the commissioner to transfer. That is true. I don't want this man here. Never. Yeah, I'm going. Whenever, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Minister has anything concerning the organization, there are serious problems. And as such, I think the no confidence vote should now be ramped up so that we see him finally to allow the Ghana Police Force to breathe. Finally, Mr. Speaker, my view is that this budget has not brought any goods for the Ghana Police Force. It has brought only money, extra money, to be used anyhow. Having been passed the community policing, there is little control over it. And that is one area I think when the hammer falls, or when the hatchet falls, it should fall right there. Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker.
Okay, all the members, please settle down. If not, we take the break. Go ahead, Mr. Felix.
Thank you very much,
Mr. Speaker.
Yes, please.
I indicated to you the discussions with the Chief Whip and myself, Ms. Amno Ali, that we had agreed, in fact, she had proposed and we agreed to the front benchers and the ministers having a total of 50 minutes. There was no recommendation to do with any shadows that are not in the front bench. In fact, Mrs. Ali was extremely strident and forceful in her views. And so Mr. Felix is a backbencher. And therefore, for him to get the 50 minutes, someone in the front bench should relieve themselves of their seat and let him move into the front bench. It sounds foolish, but it is an issue of principle. Because I think that we now need to have, when the next time Mrs. Ali and I discuss budget, we will have to have exceptions to the exceptions. We can't be saying front benches only in ministers and then all of a sudden switch course.
May I be heard? Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I am saying that we have agreements and this was never raised in the agreement.
Very well, thank you. May I be heard, honorable members? I'd like to say a few things. That I have been giving every member who has spoken more time than has been allotted. Secondly, given the configuration of the opposition's bench, a person who holds a portfolio would ordinarily be seated here. If you look at the government's bench, yes, the government's bench goes around. That's the second point I wish to make. Third point I wish to make. The third point I wish to make, well, these are shadow ministers. The third point I wish to make is that last year, I remember I defended Mrs. Teixeira and her right to go beyond the 20 minutes because I felt that her portfolio of governance necessitated her speaking, and Miss Ali did exactly as you did. Miss Ali objected, and I sought to prevail on Miss Ali, said that the portfolio that Mr. Teixeira holds dictates that she speaks for 20 minutes, and I found that she should not be restricted to 20 minutes. In the instance of national security and home affairs, I am asking, and the fourth point I want to make is that the standing orders prohibit a member from speaking outside of their allotted seat. And so, by inviting, it may look for appearances altogether right, but I would be knowingly violating or encouraging the violation of a standing order. So I'm asking, in the spirit of collaboration and cooperation that was so nicely adumbrated a few minutes ago, that we make this exception, as I intend to answer the exception we made for Mr. Shearer when the time comes for her to speak. I will be doing as I did last year. I don't know if there's going to be an objection, but I believe that given her portfolio as the governance advisor, she should not be treated as an ordinary backbench, whether she wants it or not, whether she wants it or Mr. Chair wants it, wishes it or not. So I'm suggesting that honourable members, we've made excellent time. This is an exception that I am asking for, not Ms. Ali, I am asking for.
Mr. Speaker,